All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our large digital audience through live stream Zoom. We're happy to have your virtual presence, and we hope that you'll come around in person at some time to Collegium Institute programming. Welcome also to our guests, many parents, family members of our high school students, and of course, I don't really need to welcome our high school students because they've been here for the last 3 days. Now, a few words. First, I'm Joe Presbenzo, the Managing Director of the Collegium Institute's Young Catholic Leaders Initiative. This initiative has run 6 programs in the last 2 years, programs on poetry, on beauty, on the common good, on reconciling science and religion, on Catholicism and history, and now this current summer seminar, a 3-day long affair in the heat and the rain occasionally, on how to survive and thrive in college, God, truth, and the university. I've gotten a lot of questions about the seminar topic. It seems rather niche or limiting or restricting, but if really to tell the truth, I chose it on the basis of what I would have wanted to experience before coming to college, right? Some sort of seminar that would prepare me, cradle Catholic, that point, 17, 18-year-old boy who never really ventured outside of his own little Catholic bubble, right? And figure out a way to integrate these seemingly disparate aspects of my life, right? Living in a secular and studying a secular university, a concern with the truth and a concern about God, right? So over the past 3 days, our high school students have examined all 3 of those topics in succession. So on the first day, we had Professor Amy Richards present on the idea of a university. What is its purpose? Why do we go to it? What is the knowledge and wisdom that we should seek at the university? Or is it just sort of pre-professional program? Then we had Jessica Murdoch speak on faith and reason, particularly as it pertains to university life and our own individual quests for the truth by means of each. And then we had scavenger hunts, our post-row workshop. On the second day, we examined truth, right? What is truth in the first session with Dr. Chile? We had an inquisition of sorts where students would present a defense of truth, and they would be questioned by a very vigorous panel of 3, myself being one of them. And then we had a session on being true to reality, to yourself and to others, right? So on this last 3rd concluding day, we went on a pilgrimage through Philadelphia, appreciating the fact that we have here 2 really living witnesses of how to be true to God, ultimately, in St. Catherine Drexel and in St. John Neumann. Now, when we were thinking of the keynote address for this wonderful series of days, pondering these important questions of God and truth and the university, we had the great fortune, probably providential, of having our esteemed keynote lecturer reach out about a forthcoming book that she was co-writing with a good friend of hers, Professor Thomas Smith. And our keynote speaker, I should note, is Anna Moreland. She's an associate professor of theology in the Department of Humanities at Villanova University, as well as being the Anne Quinn Welsh Endowed Director of the University Honors Program. And just as this seminar is the type of event I would have wished to have gone to, the book that Professor Moreland and Professor Smith have written is the type of book I wish I had read prior to coming to college. And not only prior to coming to college, but just generally earlier in my life. The earlier, the better, right? For this book is called Majoring in Life, The Complete Guide to Adulting, addressing these Catholic, lowercase c, universal questions of love and work and leisure. So it's my great privilege to hand over the floor to Professor Moreland.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you to Professor Chile, to the staff at Collegium for inviting me this evening. I've long been a really big fan of the work that Collegium does for the University of Pennsylvania, for this city, and then more broadly as well. It really is the model of where Catholics are going to be finding education and insight for the future. So I'm delighted to be part of it. And I had a great afternoon with some of your sons and daughters, with our high school participants today. We talked about leisure. So I'm going to give a bird's eye view of the book. But we taught these students read 2 of the chapters for this week, and we had a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to them this afternoon. So what I'm going to do this evening is, I haven't done this before, give a bird's eye view of the whole book, beginning by just telling you why I wrote it, why definitely not a father, why Dr. Smith and I wrote this book together. I have a former student here, Ted, welcome. So I've been teaching students like Ted for about 16 years at Villanova. None know what it's like, Ted, but students like Ted, and have been listening to them, because teaching is so much more about listening than it is about talking. And as I've told the high school students this afternoon, I started to grow in my concern about how college, the university experience is not equipping young people to live a flourishing life. And I started about 5 years ago teaching a course in the honors program called Shaping an Adult Life. And at the end of that, the 3 components of which are the meaning of work, the meaning of leisure, and relationships. At the end of the semester, when I read the student evaluations, it really threw me back on my heels. I had never gotten evaluations like this course rocked my world, blah, 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 blah. It was like I had struck a nerve. I'd like put my finger on a raw nerve of my students' lives. And I thought, wow, it was intense. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll start writing a book to reach students that I can't teach. And I ended up asking my friend Tom, Dr. Smith, to write this with me. And so over the last 4 years, Dr. Smith and I have been writing these chapters. With the manuscript is finished. But more importantly than writing the chapters, we've been workshopping the chapters with students throughout these last 4 years. And so we've been listening. Students have been very much part of the writing process as well. And the quotes that I'm going to read this evening are quotes from actual students who wrote these little vignettes that made their way into the book, so that you can hear in the book not only sort of a middle-aged parental voice, but more importantly, the voices of young people in college, young adults in college. If I meander too much, will you tell me? Because hi, Zoom people, I want you to be able to see me, but I walk around. It's hard for me to stay in one place. Okay, so I'm going to talk this evening about 3 particular challenges that college students face, and I'm addressing high school students too. It's the high school students here are going to be way more equipped to enter college than most high school students, because they already this afternoon, but now are going to get a real sense of what 3 challenges are in these 3 areas of work, leisure, and relationships that particularly face college students. And I'm going to pair those up with 3 strategies to address those challenges. Okay, so the first one is work. In work, students face a severe choice paralysis. Meg Jay, a clinical psychologist at the University of Virginia, uses this great metaphor of somebody caught in the middle of an ocean. Great swimmer. I don't know if any of you are winter swimmers, you know, the kind that get up at 5 a.m., have to go to practice. If you're a swimmer, this swimmer has got great skills. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's been over prepared for swimming. She's got all the skills, but the problem is that she doesn't know where she's going. She doesn't know whether she wants to go to Bermuda or Florida. So what is she? She's stuck out in the middle of an ocean with nowhere to go. She's stuck in what we call choice paralysis. That is it's an epidemic on college campuses. This can show up though in 2 ways. I'm going to talk about Brooke. Brooke is an amalgamation of students that I've encountered over the past 16 years. Brooke arrives to an elite college. She's a business major. She's won the race of high school. She's gotten into an elite college. She's got it all figured out. Her parents and her family and everyone's really proud of her. Her first anxiety is, what am I going to major in? She finds her major. She decides to major in finance, minor in accounting. She joins all the right clubs, and she's like racing through college. And sophomore summer, she gets an internship in New York. And this is Brooke is a real student. I could actually tear up thinking about Brooke. But okay, so Brooke, here's Brooke in her own words. During my freshman year internship, I developed paralyzing anxiety about my future that resulted in me seeing a therapist weekly. Sophomore year, I isolated myself in my anxiety, only speaking to my boyfriend about it, losing my entire group of friends. I decided to make myself so busy that I wouldn't feel anxious. It didn't work, but it did fill my resume. I thought that would guarantee me a job, so help me deal with anxiety, but it just made things worse. Now I've got what all my friends want, a well-paying job at a top bank, but I'm not sure that this is what I want. I feel like I backed into this career because it was something practical and prestigious. So what Brooke does to deal with her choice paralysis is rush through her decision-making process. She arrives at the university and she rushes through the decision-making process. She's a senior. She goes into my class and she writes in her journal day in and day out that she feels stuck. And she's accepted the job offer, but she doesn't want to show up in June to her job. So that's one way to rush through the decision-making process. Her roommate, Sophia, however, there are a lot of Sophias on college campuses, her response is the opposite. Sophia shows up to college and she doesn't want to be Brooks. Brooks loom very large in the imagination of college students. Sophia very much doesn't want to be Brooke. She wants to choose a major that she loves. She wants to choose a minor that she loves. And she doesn't even decide what her major is going to be until second semester sophomore year. She said she's going to really experience college. This is Sophia. I was burned out by the time I arrived at college. I wasn't going to do that again. I was done with trying to do impressive stuff. I knew there was something more. There weren't going to be the same check marks in college like there were in my high school. This was freeing, but it also made my freshman year full of confusion and loneliness. And let's be clear that Sophia's a little judgy about Brooke, because Sophia thinks that Brooke is just in it for the money. Sophia's an English major, but Sophia walks into my class senior year just as stuck as Brooke is. She has no idea what she's going to do after graduation, and she's got there's no dotted line between these classes that she's taken and she's loved, but they have done nothing to help her engage the professional discernment questions of what do I want to do with my life. So they're both stuck. Sophia is staring at the shelves, not knowing what she wants to pick. She doesn't want to choose she delays choosing her major, and she delays engaging that professional discernment question, and Brooke rushes through it. So choice paralysis is a problem. It emerges in two ways, either rushing through the decision of professional discernment or not deciding, ending up at graduation with no idea what you want to do with the rest of your life. Okay, so what led them here? The high school experience. The high school, not everyone can go to Martin's Classical or Martin Saints or Regina and Jalora, right? Most students are not built, most educational systems around this country are not models, right? Yours are countercultural. Most students arrive, at least to Villanova, having won the race of high school, thinking that that high school is a race, the goal is college. Somebody said to me, Miriam, didn't you say that you arrived to freshman year in high school, and what is this ethos of the school? It's we're going to get you into a college, we're going to get you into a great college, right? That's what you've got, this marathon, clear guiding markers, and you know what the ending point is. And so students arrive then to college. Students arrive then to college and they think, ooh, another marathon, I know how to play that game and win at it. So that's what I'm going to do when I arrive to college. The problem is that college is a really big, confusing supermarket. It's like Costco. It's overwhelming. Students arrive to college and they've got to make all these choices about friends, about majors, about minors, about internships, and it's overwhelming. And so they don't know what they're hungry for. They've got to make dinner. They've got to make some choices about dinner. They don't know how to cook. They don't know what they're hungry for, and they're going aimlessly up and down these aisles. Brooke throws stuff into her cart and races without even thinking about what she actually is hungry for. And Sophia, as you saw before, stares at the shelves, not knowing. So you come from this high school marathon knowing exactly what the goal is, and then you show up to college and it's not a marathon, it's a confusing supermarket. And so you've got to reorient yourself and think, okay, how am I going to make these important choices about who I am, who I want to be, and what do I want to do with my life? So the strategy is to enter into an actual discernment process, to actually engage the discernment process, not to run away from it and not to be paralyzed by it, but to engage in the discernment process. I'm going to give you 4 features of the discernment process. It's just like a little taste of what I talk about. One, the first is that I think that we think, how do I say this? We think we can solve problems in our heads. We think if I think long enough, if I write a pro-con list, I can decide what major I want to do, what internship I'm gonna take, what I'm gonna do after college. But really, what we need to do is rehabilitate our imaginations. We need to think more broadly about what professional success could look like. We need to engage real people who are professionally happy. We need to do the sort of thing. I'm going to give you a quick story of myself. I was early married. I had 2 children very close together in the fog of early motherhood. But my husband and I were living in DC. We went to the Folger Shakespeare Library to hear Marilyn Robinson, one of my favorite authors, give an interview with an NPR interviewer. And I remember I was a little, I was nursing, so I was exhausted, but we were out. I had to take advantage of it. And I remember just kind of looking up onto that stage and thinking, oh my gosh, I want to be you. She was so poised and articulate and thoughtful and just all these things that I thought, yeah, she's got it. How do you get that? Well, I didn't become a fiction writer, but I had a model of a woman who is successful and professionally fulfilled and thoughtful and insightful as a fiction writer and essay writer in a way that I wasn't yet, but wanted to be, right? So you engage your imagination and ask yourself about who's professionally actually fulfilled and ask them, how did they get there, okay? Number 2, you want to move away from a pro-con, I'm like zeroed in on the high school students here. You want to move away from a pro-con list. We do pro-con lists all the time, right? To get us through decision-making processes. Pro-con lists, they're okay. But if you start moving away from a pro-con list and toward a good versus good or right versus right list, then that shifts your thinking. Say you've got most of you still have the decision about where you want to go to college, right? You want to think about what's good about this one particular option? What are the goods at stake in this one particular option? What are the goods at stake in this other particular option? What does that do? It gets you to recognize that committing to one involves the tragedy of walking away from the other. And that shifts your thinking. It also makes you think about what are you drawn to in each of these 2 options, let's say in each of these 2 schools, instead of like what the negatives are, instead of like a weighing of a pro-con. Just try it and it will shift, it will reframe the way that you're walking through whatever discernment process it is. For high school students, it's going to be where I want to go to college, but for college students, it gets much more complex really quickly. I'm trying to decide whether I have time to tell my Loyola Baltimore story.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So in graduate school, I'm getting married, or maybe I'm already married. I don't even know. But I get offered my first job. It's really exciting because I never thought I'd get one. And it's at Loyola Baltimore, which is this dream place for me, dream theology department, suits me in every single way, love the Jesuits. My mother is like 45 minutes away in DC. She's a widow. Everything's perfect. My husband is in law school at Michigan, and we have it all worked out. He's going to do his third year at Georgetown. He gets an internship across the country at a clerkship in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And all of a sudden, I'm turning 30. I realize it's not like I get the baby disease, but I think like, you know what, if we're going to start a family, like it's going to get hard pretty quickly if we don't do this. And I realized I want the goods versus goods, the right versus right. I wanted to be a theologian at Loyola Baltimore, I really did, but I wanted to become a mother as well. And so I deferred the job for a year, and then I walked away from it, not thinking I would end up at Villanova years later. That was a total fluke. But I walked away from it. Why? Because I thought in terms of what is the stronger good? What is the more compelling good that I want at this time in my life? And I chose to move to Santa Fe and start a family. Thank God we were actually able to start a family. But and I walked away from that job that really had been my dream job up to now. Do you see how that's an example of thinking in terms of right versus right and good versus goods? Okay. Third feature, you don't want to think about what am I good at when you're thinking about what you want to do with your life. You want to think about what do I want to become good at? What you see as when you see somebody who's really good, oh my gosh, athlete, Sebastian, great athlete. Give me an example. Okay, anybody? What?
Michael Phelps.
Michael Phelps. Okay, great. Michael Phelps is really good at what he does, swimming, right? Okay, great swimmer. He looks like a natural. The thing is that Michael Phelps has put in countless hours to become of hard work. Michael Phelps wasn't, I mean, God knows, I don't know Michael Phelps, but chances are Michael Phelps wasn't amazing at age 6. He became amazing with hard work. So you want to ask yourself, not what am I good at, but what do I want to become good at? Okay, that's third feature. Fourth feature is you want to develop companions on the way, would be the sort of Ignatian way of talking about it. Gosh, are we having a lot of technical difficulties? It doesn't really matter. You want to develop companions on the way, or you want to develop weak ties. I already mentioned this. You want to look at the people, the adults in your lives who you admire, who you respect. And you know what high school students, what you should do? You should ask them or think to yourself, where did they go to college? And if you write a map to yourself of the adults that you admire and write where they went to college next to their names, you're going to realize that it's just this incredible sort of panoply of colleges. So it'll reduce the importance of, ooh, where am I going to go to college question. You know, you can blossom where you're planted, where you go to college. But what you want to do is do what I did with Marilyn Robinson, is try to find people that you respect and admire and ask yourself why. And then ask them for coffee or for a Zoom meeting or get advice from them. You want to develop weak ties. These are people not in your immediate ambit, but people, neighbors, or people, stretch yourself a little bit more. Okay. So the first challenge was choice paralysis. The first strategy was engage in professional discernment. And I talked about 4 features. Number 2, leisure. Students, this is going to be a little bit of a review for you from this afternoon. The students that I teach, think of free time as wasted time. Free time is wasted time. Why? Because even the extracurriculars that they engage in have become work. They feel like work. Why? Because that marathon that I talked about a couple of minutes ago trains high school students to think of everything as productive time. If you're doing anything outside of school, it's got to be working toward that college application. It's got to materialize somehow in the college application. If not, it's not worth spending time at. So then that shapes the high school student's imagination. And by the time they get to college, free time is wasted time. And it's really a hard culture shock because they arrived at college with a lot of free time and having to structure it. Okay. I just said college app insanity. I don't think I need to go into it at all. There are 3 ways in which when students arrive to college, 3 particular challenges. The first is involvement culture. This is the the extracurricular activities that just fill up a student's schedule. The second is technology, and the third is alcohol. Okay, technology. I'm going to read from, oh, sorry, involvement culture. Oh, I forgot to have an involvement culture. I do have an involvement culture quote, but I won't read it to you. I'll make it up because I know these students. Bob shows up to Villanova, and third week of school, I think, there's this activities fair, and he walks around and he writes his name on every club because he's kind of nervous about making friends. And he thinks, well, if I join clubs, I'm going to make friends, and that'll solve my loneliness problem, and I'll be really engaged, and I won't have to deal with my time management problem. Well, by November, when he goes home for Thanksgiving break, he's so exhausted. And it's not just his classes that have made him exhausted. It's all these activities, all this stuff that he's doing outside of class. And he doesn't exactly know why he's doing it. He's like rushed into involvement in order to deal with the loneliness problem. Involvement culture is a real problem on college campuses all across the US. So you want to be really intentional about what you do, because extracurriculars become work. Technology. Okay, I'll read from one student. I'd love to be less attached to my phone, but then I'd have no friends, no social life, no way to keep track of the work I have to do, no alarm clock, no step calculator, no access to email. I have to respond through GroupMe, Facebook, or group text for my class projects and club commitments. My school just created a virtual ID for our phones. So now, without my phone, I couldn't get into the library or dining hall. I basically wouldn't be able to function. It is really hard to function in this culture, because we're so phone dependent. And then, as we talked about this afternoon, technology is built to be addictive, right? So technology is a huge problem for college students. It's a huge problem for all of us, for me, for high school students. And it's something to start to attend to pay attention to, as we talked about this afternoon, to discipline yourself out of. The third feature is alcohol. I'm here to tell you, I was not going to write about alcohol in the leisure chapters. It was not something I was interested in, even like looking under the hood. I'd rather just not know. But my students read chapters and convinced me that I had to include a section on drinking. And they wrote these vignettes for me that were actually really heartbreaking. So here's one student. She's a great student. Oh my gosh. Binge drinking seems like a good idea because it helps boost my confidence, reduce my insecurities, and forget about other life obligations to allow me to loosen up and meet new people. However, in reality, binge drinking is not good for my physical or mental health, and I usually wake up with a headache and anxiety the next morning. Yet, after drinking some Pedialyte and taking a long shower, I'm ready to do it again and face the same consequences. I won't lie that I like being drunk. It makes me feel brave and invincible. My drunk self can talk to people I am intimidated by and have the tough conversations that my sober self can't. There's a sober thoughts or drunk something or sober thoughts. Drunk words or sober thoughts. Thank you. Drunk words or sober thoughts. A student said that to me. I was like, what? Okay, sorry. Where am I? Sarah Vaughn's like, how do you know that? All right. So I read too many books. That's right. My drunk self can talk to people I am intimidated by and have the tough conversations that my sober self can't. And I think that's why I like the feeling. I am jealous of her in a way because she is able to take the plunge without double or triple checking how far the fall is. The cycle of overthinking how people might perceive me is definitely something I can improve by working on myself while sober. But as long as I have alcohol as a crutch, I know I won't put in the work. Binge drinking is not actually a good habit for me. It just makes me feel good in the moment, so I chase the feeling. And you put technology and drinking together, and I'm here to tell you, I do not want to be a college student again. It's exhausting because you have to show up to the party, take the pictures, curate with all the people, right? So nobody feels excluded. Curate the pictures, post the pictures, like the pictures. I mean, it's a full-time job going out and posting about it. So involvement culture added to technology, added to the drinking culture on college campuses, it's a Molotov cocktail. It's exhausting and students want out. Students tell me they want out and they want to create alternatives. And what do I tell them? Let's do it. And they do it. And they make small changes and it makes a difference. So the strategy for in section number 2 in leisure, we talked about a little bit this afternoon, is planting, pruning and planting. And if you can do one, don't prune, plant. Because we talk a lot about getting off of our phones, but we don't talk enough about why are we getting off our phones? What do we want to fill our leisure time with? My students look at me in leisure time like, what's that? They have no idea what that is. They've never heard of it before. Why? Because free time is wasted time. Okay, so what's at the center of life? It's giftedness. It's that Genesis 1 and 2. That is at the center of life, is the center of the work chapters and the center of the leisure chapters. Everything flows from that giftedness. Talked about it this afternoon, but we'll just briefly say that the Sabbath isn't built for weekdays. The weeks culminate in the Sabbath. It's the opposite of how we think today. Let me just say that again. We talked about it this afternoon, how Sundays is like, ooh, I get to finish homework. I get to sort of, it's my catch-up day because I don't have meat, so I don't have X, Y, these other commitments that usually happen on Saturdays. So Sunday is like, oh, I'm going to get ahead on my work. I'm going to get ahead on sleep, or it's not actually honored for what it is, for what it should be. It should be the center of the week. It should be the place is filled with leisure activities that are our ends in themselves, are what we do fruitfully, not productively, as Anna beautifully put this afternoon. We need to reclaim Sabbath practices, not only on Sundays, but throughout the week. And once we do that, we can reorient, we can realize that just like work serves a good life, leisure practices serve a good life. And as I said this afternoon, what you choose to do, anyone know what you remember, what you choose to do for work and for leisure shapes you. What else? Molds you and changes you just as much as what you choose to do for work. What you choose to do for leisure shapes you, molds you, and changes you just as much as what you choose to do for work. That's like the opposite of the way that we normally think. My students think so much more. They're obsessed over what their major is going to be and what they're going to do after college. And they've got no thought to how they spend their leisure time. And you know what? The results, the facts are in the pudding. What's the what in the pudding? The proof is in the pudding, because their leisure life sucks. Okay. Friendship, it turns out, is at the heart of leisure time. We talked about flow this afternoon, the place where you really, the heart of friendship, the heart of leisure. Why? Because we're built for relationships. We'll talk about that in a second. The heart of leisure is that friendship, is a relationship. I'm going to tell you about a student who just graduated. This is just one example of one little change that you can make in high school and college that's going to make a difference. When I was a junior, I started to become more involved in the service frat on campus. And after going to the club bonding events, I became really close with the other members. During one night of heavy drinking, we all admitted to each other that we had loved playing the game Settlers of Catan with our friends and families growing up. Remember this afternoon when I said that when I teach leisure practices, it's mostly about rehabilitating versus creating new ones, because these are things that have been pushed away when they were younger. This is an example of that. Okay. We started jostling with each other about who could build the largest settlements. By the end of the night, we decided we'd start playing regularly. So throughout the fall semester, we would get together once a week to play Catan. It was the first time in college I had ever done any kind of fun hangout activity. Did you just hear that? This is her junior year. And she's a really fun young woman because I've taught her. This was the first, I just need to read that again. This was the first time in college I had done any kind of fun hangout activity that was planned around something other than drinking. Sorry, I forgot to read the rest of the sentence. We eventually got a group of around 7 of us who consistently played every Tuesday night. It became such a fun tradition. We would play the game a couple of times through and then just sit around and talk. Setting aside the time to play this game together opened the door to doing more things as a group, as we started to plan full-on game days with Catan and Quiplash and Mario Kart, etc. We became really close, and they are still some of my best friends today. I actually met my boyfriend through our Catan night. This is my favorite memory in college. It's just a Catan night. It's just this little thing, this little change that made a huge difference in the students' lives. So in the student's life. So the strategy is pruning and planting. And if you want to focus on one, you focus on planting, and you can focus on that one plant, that one Catan night. It'll bear fruit. It will make a difference in your leisure practices. Okay. Last the last segment that I write about in the book. Here I'm going to talk about epidemic of loneliness is at the heart of what I'm going to talk about, but then there's sort of some related issues, I think, that I'll mention. So in terms of the problem. So when Tom and I started writing this book, we thought that the hookup culture was the problem on campus. We really did. But we realized over the course of writing the book, A, that students are just not hooking up in the way that they did, at least when I was in college, in part because that's access to porn, of course. But B, really the key issue is not hooking up. The key issue is loneliness. There's an epidemic of loneliness on college campuses all across the country. I'll tell you when the penny dropped for me. I was doing a dating workshop. It's another story for another day. I got into this mess actually through this dating assignment that I give in an intro theology class, but that then blew up into these dating workshops. Okay, so I was conducting this dating workshop. I can come another day for you. At the end, it's like this 5 tips to success. It's really cute. At the end of the workshop, it was opened up to questions and conversation, and a student raised her hand and said, "Oh my gosh, I could use this to make a friend." And I literally was like, it's like the scales fell from my eyes, because I didn't know that it was hard to make friends. It wasn't hard to make friends for me when I was in college, because we could sit down and have brunch for like 5 hours at the dining hall without moving anywhere. And friendship happens when you're not doing 85 things in a day. But students, I find, and they tell me over and over again in my office, that they're really lonely. The challenge on college campuses is not hooking up. It's loneliness. And yet the hookup culture, it shapes the social imaginary. It shapes the imagination of students around the students that I teach, because they think everyone's doing it, even if everyone isn't doing it. So we still have to address it, of course. It's not just that hookup culture, people aren't hooking up as much, although it shapes their social imaginary. It's also that I'm here to tell you that the relationships that walk around college campuses are not attractive to other students. Why? Because they're quasi-marital relationships. It's like your roommate starts to date somebody and you think she's moved to Kentucky because you never see her again for like 4 months straight until she rematerializes because she broke up with her boyfriend. These relationships that happen at college campuses are like the worst marriages ever, because they're all consuming. I mean, they're just, if Mike was my everything, sorry, I have 2 kids here, he'd be my nothing. Like, I can't, he would never be able to be my everything. Like a marriage is embedded in a wider network of friendships. I'm friends with Sarah Vaughn. Thank God I'm friends with Sarah Vaughn, because then Mike doesn't have to listen to me all the time. If you learn to be in relationship in these sort of quasi-marital, all-absorbing, insane situations, A, nobody around you thinks that's attractive, and B, you're setting yourself up for an unsuccessful marriage. Okay. The second, so this is related to the fear of rejection. Okay, when I give these romance talks around the country, I swear to God, I did not go to grad school for this. I'm a theologian. It was not at all where I thought I'd end up, but here I am. And I do this word map, that you can do on Poll Everywhere. And it's been, Tom and I done this a lot of times. And the question is, in one word, what's your worst fear about dating? And rejection here is actually not as big as it normally is. Why? Because this is a word map. The last one I did this spring at the University of Notre Dame, 200 guys, a male dorm. So they were a little less honest, I would say, than when there's a co-ed group. But fear of failure and fear of rejection motivates so much of what college students do. And I want you to pay attention to that, high school students, and not let your fears and your anxieties be in the driver's seat. What motivates both Brooke and Sophia is a fear of failure or rejection. You see this here in the dating as well. Failure totally sucks. I'm not going to say that failure doesn't suck. I failed and it totally sucks. But letting failure drive your decision making and actions sucks more. It can ruin your college experience. So fear of rejection is at one of the center, really. I mean, I was on the phone last week with an alumni who wants to ask out a young woman, another alumni. Ted, I'm not going to tell you who. And this is on Zoom. Okay. And he was telling me, like, Dr. Moreland, you don't understand. Like, I just don't know what she's thinking. And I'm like, well, the way to find out what she's thinking is to say what you're thinking. And he's like, no, I just can't do it. Because what if she says no? What if she's not? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, of course, what if she says no? If you're not risking anything, then you're not gaining anything. That fear of rejection is real, and you can name it and you can understand it, but you need to overcome it. Because what is a room full of fear of rejection people? What does that make you all? It makes you all lonely, right? Okay. The next feature that is a very real, I think it's a very real part of the history that young people bring to college campuses is wounds. Wounds either of decisions that they carry around that weren't their own decisions, but were their parents' decisions. I'm talking about either divorce or unhappy marriages, of which there are many, that young people carry those wounds around with them, wounds of not of their own making, or of first loves that have gone bad. So that first breakup is awful. It is gut-wrenching, it's annihilating. But since there's less dating, there's less breaking up, and so there's less possibility of strategies of overcoming that heartbreak. And the wound, when the wound heals, the scar makes you stronger, right? So you want to recognize that wounds are awful, but you want to learn how to toughen yourself up, how to get to the other side. So I've talked about the epidemic of loneliness, fear of failure, rejection, and wounds. Okay, here's the deal though. We're built for relationship. We don't get a choice in that. This is Eros, this Cupid. You didn't read the symposium. Did you read the symposium? No, you guys read it for last week, but you didn't read it this week, right? Okay. This is a Platonic insight in the symposium, not just in the symposium, but we are built for relationships. The Christian insight, that insight is deepened in the Christian. Why? Because as Imago Dei, the God that we are, that builds us, that creates us and sustains us, and that provides for us is relationship, is Trinitarian, is love, right? That is fundamentally how we are built. So the epidemic of loneliness is particularly awful because it goes against how we are built. What happens, and we write about this in the romance chapters, what happens with this sort of fundamental anthropological fact and this crazy epidemic of loneliness on college campuses is that we are asking, instead of asking too much of sex, we ask too little of sex, because either the hookup culture or the what do we call it? I don't know. All the students who are deciding that they don't need to date in college, that they have to focus on themselves. Oh, so many of them. So I'm Dr. Moreland. I have to like work out what I'm going to do with my life, and then maybe like when I'm 30, Will Smith will walk into my workplace, and all of a sudden I'll be swept off my feet. Like, that's a rom-com. It's not real life. But hold on, I just got distracted by Will Smith. That opting out and hooking up are two sides of the same coin. They both suppress eros, the erotic dimension of human life, to sex. They make it mechanical. They're either afraid of it on the one hand or rush into it and make it mechanical on the other hand. What are we doing when we opt out or we hook up? We are reducing eros to sex. There's an erotic dimension to human living. It is what human living is all about. And when we either opt out or we hook up, we reduce it to a transaction. Okay, there's more to say, but I'm not gonna say anymore. Okay, so we're built for eros. The strategy that I'm going to talk about is a way to navigate intimacy, a way to think of yourselves. This metaphor works really well with our students. So if you think of yourself as a house, it's a kind of cute house with a picket fence. Think of yourself as a house. Some people are walking in the neighborhood and you're not crazy about them. They're toxic. You want to say like, bye, you want to not invite them even through your front gate. Others you want to invite onto your front porch and maybe have a drink with them, get to know them. When you really would like to get to know somebody more, you want to invite them either to the living room or the dining room, maybe a more formal dining room, or even to the kitchen. You should spend a lot of time at the kitchen. Remember, we talked about Aristotle this afternoon, sharing the proverbial amount of salt together. Kitchen, as you grow in intimacy, as you grow in trust, you spend a lot of time in the kitchen. The problem is that students run to the bedroom, but they run to the bedroom I'm not just talking about sex here. The thing that's more prevalent, it seems to me, is an oversharing of yourselves online. And so then you're not ready to share with each other in person. If you overshare and it's dangerous to overshare with each other online. So you're rushing up to the bedroom, either with oversharing online or in the physical sense, when really what you should be doing is spending a lot of time person to person in the kitchen. Okay, so think of yourselves as a house and invite people in, but invite people in a sort of in a healthy, in a safe, in a way that protects your boundaries, but doesn't make your house a fortress. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, finally, I'm going to end with, the ending is a little bit of a process. I'm going to end with a quote. C.S. Lewis wrote, he gave a series of radio lectures that were published in this book, The Four Loves, and this is a great quote. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your own selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. So when you choose to protect yourself and not risk yourself either for friendship or for love, that changes you. That loneliness changes you. You're not going to lock it up in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. In that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. Okay. So in this last section on love, the epidemic of loneliness is the heart of the challenge. And then the strategy is thinking of yourself as a house and being intentional about how you navigate intimacy, and do not overshare online. Okay, that was a mom talking just now. Just came out. Okay, so summary. All right, so in work, we talked about choice paralysis, remember a little while ago? The strategy to pair that up with is engaging the professional discernment process. We talked about 4 features there. In leisure, we talked about the idea that free time is wasted time. Generally, that's how we think about free time, but you want to think about pruning and planting, and if you just choose one, choose planting. And then with the epidemic of loneliness is in love, that's the epidemic on college campuses, and you were given a tool to navigate intimacy. Okay, so as I said to you all this afternoon, I want you to become a driver of your own life. I don't want your anxieties to become the driver. You want to walk intentionally through college. And I'm just going to read the poem that we ended this afternoon with, right? Because it's the heart of the book. It's at the heart of this whole project, which is to be intentional about how you engage your life. This is a poem called The Road by Dana Gioia. He sometimes felt that he had missed his life by being far too busy looking for it. Searching the distance, he often turned to find that he had passed some milestone unaware, and someone else was walking next to him. First friends, then lovers, now children and a wife. They were good company, generous, kind, but equally bewildered to be there. He noticed that no one chose the way. All seemed to drift by some collective will. The path grew easier with each passing day, since it was worn and mostly sloped downhill. The road ahead seemed hazy in the gloom. Where was it he had meant to go, and with whom? You don't want to end up like the narrator in this poem, as I mentioned this afternoon. Thank you. That was my goal, was to leave time for questions and conversation. Although I know you all have had a